The traitor Astartes corrupt the laws of nature to expand the domains of their benefactors. Disciples of the most decrepit creeds bolstered by spite, apathy, and resentment. Each justifies their atrocities made against life itself by upholding creeds of repugnant ideals. Yet among all, those who give worship to the grandfather of the ruinous pantheon exceed all others in their distortions of the value of life. For today, we shall elucidate the warbands of chaos devoted to the Plague Lord. The thralls of the great corruptor, the warbands of Nurgle.
Say what you like about the 14th Legion. They are mean, ugly bastards, but tenacious. There's no one I'd rather have by my side in a war of attrition, and almost anyone else I'd rather have against me. The Legiones Astartes would bear many burdens and struggles during their years of service to the Imperium. Armed with the deadliest of weapons and clad in the most durable of armor, the Space Marines of the Imperium would endure wounds and pains aplenty in their many wars waged across the stars. Yet every sentient being can only bear so much suffering before succumbing to the embrace of madness, death, or a fate far worse. For today, we shall elucidate the relentless, unfeeling carrions of disease, corruption, and pestilence. The 14th Legion of the traitor Astartes, the Death Guard. The Master of Mankind would seek to unite humanity under the rule of his new, singular vision. The Age of Strife would leave humanity's tattered fragments strewn across the stars, leaderless and without the hope of a brighter future. Holy Terror had become a husk of its former glory, as techno-barbarians pillaged and scavenged a meager existence upon the origin of human endeavor. Yet with the ascension of the Emperor, a burgeoning Imperium would be built. Upon the scattered foundation of terror, a new breed of warriors would be born to subjugate and cleanse the galaxy, to fulfill the Emperor's vision. The unification wars of terror would see many aspirant Astartes drafted into the legions of the Angels of Death, with one such legion, the 14th, known then as the Dusk Raiders. Drawn from the war tribes of Old Albia, neophytes would be installed within the 14th as well as 8th and 10th Legions. Once a true rival to the Emperor's own armies, Old Albia had relented to join the Imperium and would gift its most promising sons to join the armies of the Legiones Astartes. Relentless warriors and science-minded tacticians would be the hallmark of the Sons of Old Albia, as its technologies such as proto-dreadnoughts would be adopted into the fold. The most zealous supporters of the Emperor's vision, the legacy of Old Albia, would be carried forth into the burgeoning Imperium by their transhuman sons. The 14th Legion would be characterized by stoicism, as heavy infantry adept at survival and endurance. Fervent to their cause and gifted unshakable discipline, the Dusk Raiders of Terror would drown their opposition in waves of ceramite-clad warriors. Experts at close combat engagements, the inheritors of the Ironsiders of Old Albia would paint their right armor plating deep crimson to signify the dried blood of their foes. The red right hand of the Emperor, the Dusk Raiders would strike at night and maximize the encroaching darkness to conceal their advance across the battlefield. Relentless, yet honorable combatants, the 14th Legion would accept the surrender of their foes as they cowered before them. Embarking upon the expanse of the Imperium across the galaxy, it would be many years before the orphaned Legion would be reunited with their Genefather. For such an occasion would see to the erosion of their glory and their inevitable downfall. Mortarion, Lord of the 14th Legion, would be spirited to the planet of Barbarus with the scattering of the Primarchs. A poisonous death world inhabited by downtrodden human settlements would be ruled by malevolent necromancers. The Xenos overlords would enslave and slaughter the humans, as the toilers of the nutrient-starved soil attempted to eke out a humble existence. Upon the battle-scarred wastes of two rival necromancer overlords, the child of the Emperor would be discovered. Observing the child's resistance to the noxious atmosphere as it lay among the corpses of the fallen, the tyrant of Barbarus, Nekar, would adopt the wailing child. Isolating the young Primarch within a tower of his fortress, he would name him Mortarion, the Child of Death. Smothered in the poison smog of the Overlord's fortress, Mortarion would be tested to his limit to endure the air's toxins and be mentored by Nekar. As Nekar sought to train the boy to inherit the mantle of rulership of Barbarus, Mortarion would with time escape his confinement and meet with the human populace of his foster world. Felling a rival necromancer overlord during its harrying of a small human settlement, Mortarion would recognize his duty to preserve his human charges and begin his great task of destroying the necromancers of Barbarus. Forming his so-called Death Guard, Mortarion and his men would fell each and every tyrannical Xenos of his world, ridding them of their undead armies and strongholds across the plains of the planet. Yet one final overlord would remain: Nekar. Despite Mortarion's advancements made in creating suits to endure the poison fog of the planet, none would be capable of enduring the harsh atmosphere of Nekar's fortress. However, as their quest to emancipate Barbarus from oppression would stall, a stranger would appear within the Death Guard settlement. Offering aid, the hooded stranger would offer Mortarion a choice. End the tyranny of Nekar, and the stranger shall leave Barbarus and allow Mortarion to rule in his stead, or accept the aid of the stranger, and with the death of his foster father's rule, Mortarion shall pledge loyalty to the stranger. Accepting the bargain, Mortarion would venture alone to end his foster father's reign. Bitter at the insinuation that he would require aid in ending the oppression of his people, Mortarion would scale Nekar's fortress, yet succumb to the noxious fumes, collapsing from entering the stronghold's gates. Nekar would leave the safety of his bastion and gloat at the failure of his protege. Seemingly fated to die, Mortarion would watch helplessly as Nekar's killing blow would be interrupted with the flash of a flaming sword. The Master of Mankind would in one motion end the life of Nekar and reveal his true form to his gene son. Mortarion would pledge to serve the Emperor, with his failure to liberate Barbarus alone. Installed as the leader of the 14th Legion, the age of the Dusk Raiders would be sundered with the return of their liege. Replacing the iconography of their Terran origins, the Death Guard Legion would seek to imitate their imposing Genefather's cultural heritage, as new aspirants would be drawn solely from the planet of Barbarus. With the inclusion of the Sons of Barbarus, tensions would begin to grow within the Legion. Former senior officers of Terra would be sidelined and demoted to be replaced with Barbaran Astartes. Mortarion's Barbaran confidant, Kalas Typhon, would ascend to the form of an Astartes and be installed as the first captain of the Legion, and with time, the legacy of the Dusk Raiders would be dismantled. As the Great Crusade waged, the Terran Astartes of the Legion would diminish, with the ranks of the Death Guard's 7 great companies now commanded almost entirely of Barbaran Space Marines. Battle Captain of the 7th Great Company, Nathaniel Garrow, would remain as the last symbol of the Legion's former glories and be detested by his upstart brethren. Yet despite such infighting, the 14th Legion would bring countless worlds into compliance with the continuation of the Great Crusade. Moving from one world to the next, the Death Guard would not rebuild nor reinforce their conquered worlds, for they were harvesters of misery and destruction alone, and their days of toiling the earth were over. Motivated to destroy the oppressors of humanity, the Fourth would carve a swathe through the Imperium's enemies and leave their corpses to nourish the earth of their newly liberated planets. Disbanding their Librarius and eschewing their former iconography and battle honors, the Death Guard would be remolded in every minute detail by the Pale King. Yet the resentment of the Death Lord would continue to grow despite his legion's victories and the Emperor's disbanding of the Librarius during the Council of Nicaea. Mortarion would never forget the denial of his vengeance against Nekar, and from the seed of bitterness, treachery would tend to its bloom. Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the 16th Legion and War Master of the Imperium, would rebel against the Emperor. Witnessing visions of a dark future, conjured by the machinations of the ruinous powers, the War Master of the Imperium would rally his brethren and their legions to bring the Emperor to heel. Horus had shown kindness to Mortarion since his reunion with the Imperium, and through many campaigns fought side by side as resolute comrades. This brotherhood would be tested with the War Master's decision to betray the Imperium, yet it would not prove difficult to form an alliance with the Pale King. Among the first to rally at his brother's banner, Mortarion would see an opportunity to achieve vengeance against his father and join the Traitor Rebellion. Upon the world of Istvan III, the Emperor's children, World Eaters, sons of Horus and Death Guard, would bring compliance to the rebellious populace. Deploying their most loyal sons, whom would give their lives for the Emperor, the traitor Primarchs would order their disposable sons to be bombarded with ordnance and virus bombs. The loyalist Death Guard and their peers would succumb to the flesh-eating toxin as it ravaged the landscape of Istvan III. Survivors of the bombardments would resist their inevitable demise and fight valiantly to end the lives of as many of their treacherous kin as possible. Battle Captain Nathaniel Garrow would escape to warn the Emperor of the impending betrayal as the Death Guard and their allies prepared for the impending counterattack. Forewarned of the treachery of Horus Lupercal, the Emperor would dispatch 3 of his most trusted sons to bring retribution to the Istvan system. Ferrus Manus, Primarch of the 10th, would lead the charge alongside his brothers Vulcan and Corvus Corax. The Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard legions would embark upon Istvan to destroy the upstart rebellion before it could reorganize. Followed swiftly by reinforcements from the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Wordbearers, and Alpha Legion, a loyalist victory would be assured. Yet with the initial stages of the Battle of Istvan V, such an overwhelming assault would prove catastrophic. As the 10th, 18th, and 19th Legions battled the prepared yet battle-scarred forces of the War Master's legions, the arrival of the second wave would turn on their allies. Surrounded by the might of 8 legions, the Loyalists would be massacred. The Death Guard would watch as the Loyalists fell to the blades and bolters of their peers, yet would not tarry before venturing forth to bring a new legion to the fold of the Traitor Rebellion. Traversing to the Thousand Sons homeworld of Prospero, Mortarion would confront the Primarch of the White Scars, Jagatai Khan, with an offer to join Horus. The White Scars had not chosen to side with either cause of the war in their efforts to ascertain the reason for Horus's actions. Deeming the traitor war effort to be ruled by pawns of malevolent forces, the Kargan of Chagoris would refuse Mortarion's offer, beginning a great feud which would last between the 5th and 14th Legions for the remainder of the war. Displeased with the Khan's reasoning, Mortarion would face the Warhawk in battle. The Master of Speed would duel the Champion of Endurance as the Honor Guards of the Keshig and Deathshroud fought at their sides. The bout would be unresolved as Mortarion would flee from the battle, yet be concluded before the end of the war. For the remainder of the years preceding the final battle to decide the fate of humanity, the Death Guard would harry the White Scars until the call to assemble within the Ulanor system. En route to their destination, First Captain Callus Typhon would reveal his true allegiance. A follower of Nurgle, the Lord of Decay, Typhon would allow for the corrupting influence of the Plague God to seep into the Death Guard's fleet vessels, transforming the 14th Legion into abominations of warp mutation. The Death Guard and their Liege Lord would be subjected to the gifts of Nurgle's rot and the Destroyer Plague. Their innate resistance to poison would prove to synergize with Nurgle's corruption, preventing the Death Guard to die from their afflictions and instead mutate to incorporate its pestilent influence. Surrendering to the Plague God, Mortarion would damn his legion to forever serve the whims of the so-called Grandfather of Chaos. Returning to the side of the War Master, Horus would test the newly reborn Death Guard during the Siege of Terra. Deploying the hulking monstrosities to bring down the Imperium's most fortified bastions, the 14th Legion, led by their Prince of Decay, would once more face the wrath of the White Scars. Facing Jagatai Khan once more in single combat, the Kargan would be no match for the now chaos-empowered Demon Prince. Yet for Mortarion's pride in his newfound strength, Jagatai would exploit his greatest weakness: arrogance. Cleaving the Pale King's head from his body, the Kargan would banish Mortarion into the depths of the warp, forcing the forces of the 14th Legion to retreat. The Horus Heresy would be won in the name of the Imperium, yet despite such a victory, fail to cleanse the galaxy of the corruption of the Plague Marines. Claiming a demon world within the Eye of Terror, the Death Guard would transform their new seat of power as the Plague Planet of the Prince of Decay. Destined to spread disease and foul corruption in their wake, the 14th Legion continued to be a scourge across the galaxy in their attempts to spread the gifts of Nurgle. Molding the Plague Planet in the image of Barbarous, Mortarion would, in an act of immense hypocrisy, rule as a tyrant overlord of his newly found fiefdom. Re-emerging from the Eye of Terror throughout the millennia, the Pale King leads bands of his former legion to spread pestilence during the Era Indomitus. No longer served by his first captain, Callus Typhon, the being now known as Typhus leads his own warband, pledged in service to the Plague God. At odds with their objectives, the champions of Nurgle nonetheless cooperate during campaigns of extreme import. With the return of the avenging son of the Imperium, Rabute Guilliman, during the 41st millennium, the Death Guard would seek to humble the Lords of Ultramar within the heart of their own empire. Enacting the Plague Wars within the realm of Ultramar, Mortarion would seek to transform the dominion of the returned Primarch into fertile ground of Nurgle's accursed garden. Confronted by Rabute Guilliman with the conclusion of the Indomitus Crusade, Mortarion would face his brother in single combat upon the world of Iax. Slaying his brother, Ultramar would seem to be doomed to fall to the thrall of chaos, yet to Mortarion's horror, Guilliman's body would be filled with a bright golden light. Possessed by the power of the Emperor, Guilliman would banish Mortarion from real space once more and fire a beam of holy light into Nurgle's garden. Setting the garden ablaze with cleansing fire, the Death Guard and Pawns of Decay would retreat from the revivified Avenging Sun and his rallied armies. Yet the 14th Legion are infamous for their endurance, and no matter how many times they shall be felled, more thralls of the Plague Lord shall stand in their place. Known for their attrition from even their earliest days as a once loyal legion, the only legion to surpass their losses incurred during the Great Crusade would be the World Eaters and Iron Warriors. Once liberated from its oppressive overlords, Barbarous would become a like to a production line of implanting new aspirants to join the ranks of the Astartes. Neophytes would overwhelmingly perish during the surgeries and procedures to grow to the stature of a space marine, yet be deemed negligible by Mortarion. Only allowing aspirants from worlds other than Barbarous on rare occasions, the Death Lord would demand a high standard for all who would join the ranks of the 14th Legion. Yet with the Legion's fall to chaos, the Death Guard would for a time splinter into warbands devised into derivations of 7. With the resurgence of Mortarion during the Plague Wars, the 14th would reform to a structure reminiscent of their former glory. Their numbers now far in excess of any Loyalist Space Marine chapter, with thousands upon thousands of Plague Marines comprising their ranks. Prior to their fall to chaos, the 14th would be a strictly structured and regimented legion. Originally organized by the Officio Militaris, with their service as the Dusk Raiders, alike to their brother legions, each and every Astartes would be equipped with arms and armaments capable of surviving any campaign of war without resupply or reinforcement. its infantry supplemented with heavy armor and support squadrons during battle. The Dusk Raiders of Old Terra would be exemplars of sustained warfare, adept at any range or environment. With the installment of their Primarch into their ranks, the Legion would be drastically changed, with its formations dissolved and reformed with each new campaign to meet the needs of their Primarch stratagems. Constantly shifting in battlefield roles, Astartes would transition from a heavy weapon specialist to a tactical marine or other specialist with every new campaign, with only tech marines, chaplains, and other specialist roles exempt from the ever-changing orders of Astartes formations. Favoring melters, flamers, and bolt guns as their tools of dealing death, the Death Guard's reliance on such weaponry would eschew the need for regular resupplies or extensive training with niche armaments. Engaging in close combat with trench daggers, barber and kukra blades, and their iconic war scythes, the black ceramite of their blades would prove to be a hallmark of the 14th Legion's deadly harvest. Simple yet effective in their use, the Death Guard's belief that a Space Marine was innately strong enough for any engagement, regardless of their armaments, would prove to be effective. Overwhelmingly deploying infantry in their campaigns, each wounded Astartes brought low in the flames of battle would be interred within dreadnoughts to serve once more as the spearhead on the next battle of their campaigns. No cost would be too high, nor weakness tolerated, as the dogged sons of Barbarous ground their enemies beneath their tread. Renowned for their ability to cleanse space hulks and destroy enemy fortifications from within, the Death Guard would be synonymous with purging the enemies of the Imperium. Recruitment within the Legion is now shrouded in much mystery, yet the Astartes recruited in the years following the Horus Heresy are regarded as lesser than their veteran peers. Though perhaps such methods used to recruit new aspirants into the ranks of the 14th are best left obscured for the sanity and decency of Imperial historians. While the ranks of the 14th would stagnate in terms of variety during their days as a Loyalist Legion, specialists within the Death Guard would enable specific roles of both honor and disgrace. Chief among all, save for the Primarch and the Legion's captains, would be the Death Shroud. The elite honor guard of Mortarion, the Death Shroud would comprise of the most battle-honored, skilled, and imposing warriors of the Legion, selected personally by their liege. Swearing oaths of secrecy, each Astartes would be marked as killed in action by the 14th's records to prevent their identity from being known. Marching into battle, armed with gigantic Manreaper war scythes, the Death Shroud shall don masks and hoods to conceal their features and battle as silent, hulking killers. Wearing Artificer-grade Terminator armor, the giant figures of the Honor Guard of the Death Lord shall never stray further than 49 paces from their Primarch, and never falter in protecting their Genefather as silent, stoic sentinels. The Grave Wardens would serve First Captain Callus Typhon as the First Company veterans of the Legion. Armed with alchemical weaponry, spewing Voscodox fluids, and collagen gases, the Grave Wardens would unleash agonizing, flesh-eating contagions across the battlefield to consume their enemies. The Destroyer Squads, unlike their Terminator-clad superiors, would wage war with forbidden weaponry, too ignoble by their venerated brethren. Alike to all Destroyer Squads of the Legions, the disgraced Astartes of the 14th carry rad, phosphex, and bioweapons of untold cruelty. Their undeniable effectiveness countering their infamous reputation. The Mortis Poisoner Squads specialized in chemical munitions, even by the standards of their Legion peers. Deployed to confined war zones such as hive cities and void ships, the Mortis Poisoners would spread contagion to erode and devour their enemies. Burdening the toll wrought from such weaponry, the members of the Mortis Poisoners would suffer withering degeneration as penance for past failures. Yet with the Legion's fall to chaos, their ranks would encompass new and foul additions of cruel champions to their warbands. Chaos Lords would rule each warband as proven champions of destruction and corruption. Scrutinized intensely by Mortarion, each Death Guard Lord must facilitate the will of their Primarch in exchange for the blessings of Nurgle. Forming the mantles of corruption, each Lord is bestowed unique traits for his service. The Lords of Contagion are belligerent and direct warriors. Contained within cataphracti armor, the Lords of Contagion wield two-handed plague reapers and blade-toothed axes in their relentless frontal assaults. The Lords of Poxes pollute the air with miasmas of toxins, eroding their enemies' defenders through sickness and sapping illness. The Lords of Virulence bombard their foes with heavy firepower, weakening fortifications with merciless hammering blows of artillery. Each survivor of their onslaught shall be ripe victims for plague and disease. Other mantles exist, such as the Lords of Parasitism, Withering, Flux and Entropy, yet no records exist of these foul titles. Blightlord Terminators form the now elite of the Traitor Legion and forge a ceaseless path of destruction. Armed with combi weapons, blight launchers, and plague spewers, the Blightlords shrug off weapons fire with their cataphracti ceramite plate and chaos gifts of blighted constitution. Advancing with relentless and remorseless contempt, only the most deadly and concentrated firepower is enough to end the undeath of even a single Blightlord. The noxious Blightbringers fight at the vanguard of the Legion and herald the arrival of the Death Guard. Sowing the battlefield for the coming corruptions, the Blightbringers nurture fear and weakness in their enemies as their chaos-forged bells toll impending decay. Each thunderous wave of its sounding spreading sickness among their opponents' ranks. Death Guard sorcerers harness the warp to spread the blessings of their foul god. Bones rot from their marrow and splinter into decaying muscles as the victims of the fell manipulations of the sorcerers convulse and spew bile from their sore-covered mouths. It is truly among the greatest miseries to fall at the hands of the sorcerers of the 14th, for each victim shall endure untold miseries and fetid mutations at the hands of their malevolent foes. Malignant plague casters harbor the malaise of the plague god's realm and accept the bloating of their bodies, now acting as vessels of abominable toxins. Spewing forth the contents of their innards, the plague casters harness the powers of the plague god to spread disease among those unfortunate enough to fall victim to their plagues. The Tallymen preach the doctrine of their patron's chosen number, 7. These demagogues of the Legion scribe and tally the blessings of Nurgle as the battles in his name wage around them. Counting diseases, wounds and signs of corruption, the Tallymen enhance the blights made in the name of the Lord of Pestilence to invoke further miseries in his name. The Biologus Putrefiers nurture the spread of disease across their campaigns. Armed with blight grenades filled with terrible concoctions, the milky gaze of the Putrefiers analyze every infection, even through the armor of ceramite or heavy vehicles. And finally, the Plague Surgeons act as living nurseries for insects and parasites within their bloated bodies. Once the Legion's apothecaries, the Plague Surgeons now offer their flesh and blood to nurture their fell offspring. Exuding infection with only the merest touch, the Plague Surgeons' surgical instruments no longer serve to save the lives of their kin, but in a cruel twist of irony, see to the spread of undeath. The 14th Legion's organization would be fragmented into 7 great plague companies with their fall to chaos. The first plague company, the Harbingers, are ruled by First Captain Typhus. Afflicted with shamble rot, biter's pox, the groaning, and zombie plagues, these shambolic yet durable champions of the Legion lay waste to the Imperium with few opponents able to stall their overwhelming onslaught. The second plague company, the Ferric Blight, favor vehicle deployment and large formations of heavy armaments. Encased in thick layers of rust, the Ferric Blight to which they are named corrodes their enemy's armor contingents, causing malfunctions and degeneration with their mere presence. The third plague company, Mortarian's Anvil, are experts of fortification. Carrying the gloaming bloat within their skin, Mortarian's Anvil are led by Gothax the Morose and unleash noxious Blightbringers to hasten their enemy's demise as they hurl themselves into doomed sieges. The fourth plague company, the Wretched, are ruled by the demon known as the Eater of Lives. Afflicted with the Eater Plague, known within its ranks as the Drizzleflesh, Pockchewer, or Endless Gift, the 4th Plague Company championed the use of sorcerers in order to summon endless hordes of Nurglings and demonic servants of the Plague God. The 5th Plague Company, the Poxmongers, bear the gift of the Sanguis Flux. Leaving trails of half-clotted blood in trails where they march, the Poxmongers make use of demon engines as their primary means of rending their enemies limb from limb. The 6th Plague Company, the Ferrymen, garrison the plague fleets of the Legion and bring new void ships into the fold. Infected with the Droning, the so-called Brethren of the Fly boast a vast amount of Blightlord Terminators into their company as they board naval vessels to capture for their own despicable needs. And last of all, the 7th Plague Company, Mortarian's chosen sons, serve as alchemists and brewers of the Legion. Concocting the most virulent and deviant poisons, the bearers of the crawling pustulence or boil blight enact the will of the Plague God through spreading his gifts across the stars. Further divided into 7 sepsis cohorts comprised of 100 Astartes apiece. Each of these demi-companies contain a further 2 maledictums, consisting of 7 colonies. Each colony contains 7 squads of 7 Plague Marines and is led in turn by lesser Chaos Champions. Death Guard Lords and Demon Princes act as Lord Commanders of each Plague Company, with each first colony of the maledictums comprised entirely of Blightlord Terminators. Despite their seeming Legion-wide command structure, in reality, each warband is autonomous in regard to the overall command of the Legion. Known as Vectoriums, these warbands differentiate themselves with unique heraldry markings and unique colony squads. Typically including plague colonies, alchemical destroyer colonies, and armored vehicle reaper colonies within their organization, the Vectoriums are armies capable of threatening even the most durable of the Imperium's forces. The heraldry of the Death Guard, while now obscured in filth and decay, once bore proud sigils of their former glory. The symbol of the Black Skull, cleaved in half, imposed with a setting black sun on a deep field of crimson, replaced by a green skull atop a sunburst icon. From their painted grey of their origins as the Dusk Raiders of Terror, ivory grey would be flanked with jade trim to honour the Legion's homeworld of Barbarous. Vertical helmet stripes would denote seniority among the Legion, with even damage incurred to the Astartes Ceramite remaining upon their armour as honour marks of their deeds. Yet with their fall to chaos, the Death Guard would turn a sickly green to reflect their disgusting nature. Typically wearing Mark III iron pattern power armour, its former purity of design now bears spikes, tentacles and horns sprouted from the bodies of their corpulent hosts. Open wounds spill organs from cracks in their armour as boils and sores populate their skin. Ever closer to their Primarch's vision of a grim reaper of men, the Plague Marines of the 14th follow in their Liege Lord's image as undead servants of hellish benefactors. Adopting the tri-lobed symbol of the Plaguefly upon their pauldrons, only those within the ranks of the Death Guard can discern the veterancy and rank of their peers by dint of the prolonged decay of their armour. The Mark of Nurgle varies among the many warbands of the Legion, as each shows their patronage in their own unique way. The Geneseed of the 14th would further spread the gaunt features and shadowy eyes of its gene lineage, initially reflecting the stoic temperament of the Death Lord. With the Legion's drafting of its Barbaran recruits, the Geneseed of the Legion would bolster their innate resistance to toxins. Yet with their fall to the ruinous powers, their gene strength would prove to be their undoing. With the gifts of Nurgle ravaging their bodies, their genetic aptitude to endure poison and corruption would continually increase their tolerance. As the mutations ravaged their bodies, their Geneseed would overcompensate, leading to magnitudes of great afflictions as their bodies exponentially rejected and absorbed the gifts of Nurgle. Now stationed on the Plague Planet, the new homeworld of the Death Guard heightens their mutations to nightmarish proportions, shackling their plague fleets using chained biomechanical platforms while idle, as shrines are made to give praise to the Plague God. The world's populace cower from their tyrannical overlords as they act as thralls to the 14th Legion, the 7 mountaintop keeps of the planet inhabited by each plague company, with the mightiest of these known as the Black Manse. Mortarian's personal fortress, replete with dungeons and horrors of the warp, the Pale King presides over his homeworld as a hypocrite to his past ideals. Revering their Primarch above all, the Death Guard would marvel at their master's example as a liberator of the oppressed and divine savior. The barbarian stock of the Legion would be unquestioning in their loyalty to their liege during the betrayal of the Imperium, and in their naivety, follow in his path to damnation. For each battle won by the Legion during the Great Crusade, the Pale King would drink a draught of poison with one of his Astartes to commemorate their victory. No toxin would be so strong as to best the Death Guard, and so it would be that the ritual toast signified their loyalty to their Primarch and defiance to submit to failure. Concoctions would contain strains of sword beetle venom, nerve bane, and other compounds, the ornate cup strengthening the bonds of loyalty between the Death Lord and his men. Driven by a need to free humanity from the oppression of its enemies, the Death Guard would be a resolute and unshakable force. Yet this ideal of emancipation would become fertile ground for the corrupting influence of chaos. Pride and arrogance would begin to fester within the Legion, and with their Primarch's defection, the 14th would be all too willing to follow his lead. Consumed with self-hatred with their submission to the ruinous powers, such contempt for their weakness would give way to a new ideal. The Heralds of Pestilence would free humanity from the rule of the Imperium with rot, ruin, and decay. Gifting their patrons foul gifts to the victims of their campaigns, the Death Guard's twisted vision of a universe ruled by the Grandfather of Chaos rescinds the remaining ounce of their remnant humanity. Worshipping the number 7 as the favoured number of Nurgle, the Death Guard seek to burgeon each of their plague companies to 70,000 Astartes. Though the 14th Legion shall never reach such a lofty goal, their continual campaigns across the galaxy, such as their resurgence during the Plague Wars of Ultramar, prove their ambitions to be resurgent. And for every war made in the name of the Plague God, humanity shall suffer untold miseries as pestilence, rot, and decay lay low the stalwart defenders of the Imperium.
In the embrace of Nurgle, I am no longer afraid. For with his pestilential favor, I have become that which I once feared.
This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. Mortarian's malignant sons skulk the stars as a reminder of the price of hubris. For their fate as the slaves of chaos proves that no bargain is worth making with the ruinous powers, nor gift given by their hands worth accepting. Yet in my final transmission of the Legiones Astartes, we shall elucidate the stalwart, incorruptible and virtuous sons of the renewed Imperium. The blade against the encroaching darkness, the Ultramarines.
The Apostles of Contagion are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. A Vectorium of the Death Guard Legion's 4th Plague Company, the Wretched. These sons of Mortarion favour sorcery and viral bombardment to spread their miasma of disease, drowning their enemies in putrescence as their litanies made in the praise of the Grandfather drown out the gurgling screams of the dying. Each corpse sacrificed as mulch for the Garden of Nurgle spawns abominations from the Immaterium from their bloated forms. Serving their Chaos Lord, Necrosius, who self-styles himself as the Hand of Nurgle, the former apothecary of the Legion bows to none save for the Grandfather. Parting ways with their Legion to better pursue their own methods of giving praise to the Plague Father, Their liege's resentment towards First Captain Callus Typhon is shared by his scions, which has often led to open conflict between their ranks and that of the Harbinger's warband. Caring not should their plague spread among the ranks of the Imperium, or even thralls of the ruinous Pantheon, their involvement during the Siege of Vrax of 813.M41, enacting plague zombie infestations, are remembered with infamy by the scholars of humanity. Clad in discolored brass ceramite, pocked with rust and grime, their armor's protective qualities are dubious by virtue of how much of their flesh is exposed. The symbol of their warband, a stylized crimson fly with eyes upon its wings, a fitting charm to recognize such fetid thralls of Nurgle. Apprenticing under the tutelage of Necrosius, this otherwise small warband counters their meager numbers with powerful sorceries, their mastery dominating demons of the Grandfather to act as cannon fodder as they unleash undeath upon their victims. The Cleaved are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. First sighted during the insurrection of Magma Cadelian of the 34th millennium, soldiers of the 334th Iridian Regiment fought to secure the planetary governor's palace, following sustained bombardment of the renegade defenders. Finding its interior to have twisted into an enormous summoning circle, though no demons of the Plague God spewed from the warp ritual site, these grotesque Astartes marched in their stead. Oozing oil-like ichor from the joints of their decayed ceramite, no weapon of the guard could stem the tide of the traitors, as wounds inflicted did little to slow their repelling of the Iridians from the planet. Seen again fighting elements of the Dark Angels during 891.M39, the Sons of the Lion quelled the warband as cyclonic torpedoes laid waste to their emerged Space Hulk. Clad in pale, flesh-colored ceramite, wet with the black putrescence which seeps from its joints, it is better left unresolved how such Space Marines might look beneath the shell of their panoplies. The symbol of their warband, a pair of crossed ebon battle axes upon a field of dirty white, epitomizes their barbaric slaughter as they festoon fetishes giving praise to the Grandfather across their ceramite. Aiding Khornate warbands on rare occasions, such as was evident during the Holocaust Blood Crusade of the 41st millennium, this warband has also joined forces with Typhus the Traveller as the Chosen of Nurgle attempted to raid the Iron Hand's homeworld of Medusa during the era Indomitus. The Deathmongers are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. Once known as the Brothers of the Anvil during their service as a loyal Space Marine chapter, during the Abyssal Crusade of 321.M37, their downfall began upon the Eldar Croneworld of Belial IV. As among the 30 judged chapters deemed sinful in the eyes of Saint Basilius, the Brothers of the Anvil embarked upon their penitent crusade within the Eye of Terror, only to be set upon by a Chaos fleet. Driven to Belial IV, wherein the Drukhari Kabalites lay in wait, those that survived torture as captives of the Dark Eldar for a solar year within Camorra fought their way back to real space. Forever changed from their ordeal, these desperate Astartes swore allegiance to the Plague Father, renaming themselves as the Deathmongers, as they pledged to kill all in their path in exchange for their deliverance from pain. Infamous for their deeds made during the Orphean War of Faith, during the 39th millennium, alongside warbands of the Night Lords and Alpha Legion, their rampage of destruction against Archconfessor Marduk of Helvermon lasted 20 years, ending the lives of a fifth of the system's total populace. The peoples of Kolkaths sacrificed to the warpsmiths of the Deathmongers to transform into mutilated cannon fodder. The Angels Revenant chapter fought to reach their stronghold as a last desperate act to save the innocent. Renaming the planet St. Marduk's Bane with the Archconfessor's death during the conflict, nuclear winter now suffocates the world, once known as Kolkaths, with the warband's duty to kill for the sake of killing complete. Clad in grey ceramite, adorned with skulls, spikes, and blasphemous idols of the Plague Father, each bears the mark of Nurgle as their sigil, centered on a 5-pointed Chaos Octet atop a field of grey. Content only to lay waste to their enemies, these unfeeling traitors sacrifice their own victories for the chance to spread further misery. The Empyrean's Blight are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. derived from the Death Guard Legion of old, led by the former captain, Gideus Kral. The Infector of Worlds embarks with his warband from the Eye of Terror to spread disease, particularly within the Sargassian Reach. Spreading the sickening Warp Plague, which has sundered several once verdant worlds. Their capture of the Brazen Minotaur's chief librarian, Fessian, during the campaign on Kasharat, required a desperate rescue mission by his peers before his sacrifice was made to the Plague Father. Aided by the Raven Guard chapter, upon the surface of the mortuary world, Shadow Captain Aramis Corin and his men cleared a path for the Brazen Minotaur's advance, yet ultimately lost men of his squad during the resultant battle. Successfully extracting Fessian before the Empyrean's Blight could extract secrets from his mind, ancient debts between the chapters were repaid, despite their casualties incurred, forcing the Sargassian Reach to its proverbial knees with continued harrying of its domains. As the sickening spread to the Forge World of Plutonis and the fortress of Fortain's World, the warband readied an invasion force to fight further afield. Once more confronted by the Brazen Minotaur's 3rd Company and Raven Guard 5th Company, the Loyalists failed to resecure Fortain's World as hordes of corrupted guardsmen delayed the Astartes as the traitor warband traversed to the neighboring system of space. Retaining the heraldry of the Death Guard Legion, typically donning corrupted Mark III Iron Designation power armor, their derivation of the Mark of Nurgle typifies their worship of the Grandfather as they continued their efforts to burgeon the expanse of its garden. The warband's objective to invade the heavily populated Condor system as the catalyst to spread the sickening across the length and breadth of the Imperium. These postulant emissaries of the Lord of Decay, oozing with maggots, boils, and dribbling necrotic flesh, devote every action to the spread of the sickening, to the point of obsession. The Grey Death are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. Once pledged as a loyal chapter of the Imperium, known as the Iron Drakes, during 321.M37, alongside 30 of their fellows, these once proud Astartes embarked upon the Abyssal Crusade by order of Saint Basilius. Venturing into the Eye of Terror, the so-called Judged chapters pledged to absolve themselves of shame by cleansing the realm of chaos of corruption, as was the objective of their penitent crusade. Marooned upon the demon world of Anafrax, following battle with the Death Guard traitor Legion, within the forests of the planet, the Astartes fended off bulbous creatures coughing infectious mucus. Harrying the Astartes for a century of combat, the Plague Marines fired to wound rather than kill, allowing for disease to spread within the ranks of the Iron Drakes, causing gradual failure of their armor systems. The infections transforming the flesh of the Astartes into fungal trees which burst from their armor. Those that did not succumb surrendered their souls to the Plague Father to prevent a similar fate. Clad in pale sage ceramite trimmed with black, the symbol of their warband, a white skull centered upon a three-pointed octet atop a field of pale green, gives praise to the Grandfather as they continue to spread his garden. Continuing their service to the Plague Lord, forever pledged to its whims, the legacy of the Iron Drakes has been erased from Imperial records to hide the shame of their capitulation. The Lords of Decay are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. Once known as the Lancers of Teros during their service as a loyal Space Marine chapter, their involvement during the Abyssal Crusade of 321.M37 swiftly led to their downfall. As part of the Judged chapters afflicted by mutations following the Ecclesiarchal Purges, their penitent crusade within the Eye of Terror would be set upon by a Chaos Warfleet soon after their invasion of the Oculus Terribus. The incident of their corruption unknown, despite records pertaining to several of their contemporaries of the Judged chapters, the warband which returned from the Eye would henceforth be known simply as the Lords of Decay. Utterly devoted to the Death Guard Legion, fighting by the side of both Typhus the Traveler and the Pale King, Mortarion. These Astartes, though not of the 14th bloodline, regardless, are favoured as an elite force by the champions of Nurgle. Clad in sickly white ceramite, pocked with decay and discoloration, the symbol of their warband, a modified red sigil of the Mark of Nurgle, is often obfuscated under layers of grime. Present during many crucial campaigns waged by the Traitor War effort, such as the Siege of Rax and Sturmhex incident. These stalwart disciples of the Grandfather aid not only the 14th Legion, but myriad allied Chaos forces to better achieve their objectives. The Lords of Silence are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. A Vectorium of the Death Guard Legion of old, this band of approximately 600 traitors lead bands of 1,000-strong thralls, whether mortal or demonic in nature. Commanded by their Chaos Lord, Siege Master Vorx, these traitors found meaning in spreading Nurgle's contagion despite their abandonment by the Pale King, Mortarion. Aiding the 13th Black Crusade of Abaddon the Despoiler with the close of the 41st millennium, the World Eater's failure to secure the Forge World of Agrippina within reach of the Cadian Gate could not be allowed to remain. Launching a new attack on the planet, with aid from the Lords of Silence, the warband unleashed devastating plagues upon the surface, taken from the bowels of space hulks arriving from the domains of the Eye of Terror. Transforming much of the populace into plague zombies to herald their advance, alongside contingents of the World Eaters, Night Lords, Thousand Suns, Black Legion, and even the Death Guard, Chaos Lord Kosalax Forsworn sought to redeem his honor at the helm of the 12th Legion's flagship, the Conqueror. Repelled once more by the strength of the innumerable Astra Militarum defenders, including elements of the Cadian survivors of their sundered homeworld, thus humanity denied the War Master's hopes to claim full dominion of the system. Noted for their involvement allying with the Weeping Whale chapter of the Wordbearers Legion during the dawn of the 42nd millennium, the Lords of Silence set upon the homeworld of the White Consul's loyalist chapter, Sabatine. Left largely unprotected due to the White Consul's aid given to defend Cadia, the 4th Company alongside their Planetary Defense Force and the Praetorian Guard Regiment dug in their heels despite the light of the Astronomicon blocking their attempts to call for aid. A splinter of the White Consuls, managing to evade total annihilation at the hands of the Lord of Silence. With aid from the Biologist Putrefier, Slurt, Lord Vorx transformed the populace into poxwalkers and plague zombies. Denying the Wordbearers their prize, with the Plague World now enthralled to the Grandfather, Sabatine remains a pox amongst the stars, as a near-perfect reflection of Mortarion's own fiefdom within the Eye of Terror. Clad in decomposing ceramite of various hues of green and brown, the symbol of their warband, a stylized human pressing their index finger in a gesture of silence, exemplifies their eerie, hushed marches. Reuniting with Mortarion, as the Prince of Decay sought to rally his legion once more to oppose the returned Lord of Ultramar, Rabute Gilliman, the warband now finds renewed meaning to their raiding, with their Primarch's return to the fold.
All mortal creatures must die. Only then can the galaxy be reborn anew.
The Purge are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. Active since the 36th millennium, waging war against both the Imperium and Xenos empires, these warriors disdain all forms of life and fight to one day cleanse the galaxy of all living creatures. Believing that all vestiges of life are inherently corrupt, these pawns of chaos seek to cleanse the galaxy in the hopes that salvation lies within the embrace of eternal rest. Too small a warband to combat the myriad foes which dwarf their numbers, each Astartes of the Purge gives praise to the Grandfather each night in hopes of a pandemic which will ultimately spread across the stars and drag all into the depths of oblivion. Clad in scum-spattered deep green and black ceramite, their symbol of 3 black flies in the shape of the Mark of Nurgle belies their obedience to the Plague Lord as a means to an end. Conducting acts of indiscriminate chemical warfare, civilian slaughter, and global extinction with no hesitation, sightings of the warband during the Anticarnis Massacre, Space Hulk incursion of Berugil Tertia, Siege of Rax, corruption of the Agri-Worlds Belru and Fealty II, and invasion of Medusa, each a piece of their relentless efforts to destroy all bastions of life. The Tainted are a Nurglite warband of Chaos Space Marines. Derived from a Vectorium of the Death Guard Legion, to compensate with their smaller numbers, The warband integrates mutated beings such as Ogryns known as Plague Spawn, created by fell sorceries by their fetid flesh grafters. Regarded as a rotten circus by its contemporaries, among their most infamous deeds would be those made during the Siege of Rax of 813.M41. Pledging their strength to the scion of Alfarius, Arcos the Faithless, alongside 11 fellow warbands, the Tainted helped defend the crucial Armory world from Imperial retaliation. Unable to prevent the planet's reclamation by the Imperium, the Tainted withdrew after 17 years of grueling warfare, the Ordo Malleus taking great pains to investigate their use of corrupted Ogryns due to the devastation they wrought. Clad in decayed ceramite of greens, browns, and beige, the symbol of their warband, a geometric variant of the Mark of Nurgle, clearly demonstrates their devotion to the Grandfather, despite their peculiar methods. Trading their plague spawn for resources with other warbands, this vile pack of marauders continue to refine their process of mutating their captured Ogryn. This has been a tale of the Great Imperium of Man, read by the Remembrancer. The putrescent sons of the so-called Grandfather make a mockery of life, so entrenched in hopeless nihilism as they are, resolving to annihilate life with the flimsy promises of a decrepit god. Their denial of the realm of the living is a testament to their nihilistic tendencies. Life is an unlikely state of affairs, especially within the times we live, for many have perished during darker days wherein hope was in short supply. Yet the indomitable spirit of humanity marches on, seeking to forge a better future for our forebears to inherit. So be grateful for the joys which life brings you, for many have sacrificed to sustain it. And only in diminishing the inequities of the day, with courage and forthright determination, can a legacy of hopelessness be denied.